Hi everyone, this is Sumant from Decode Now. Welcome to the lecture series on building a Spring Boot application to perform basic CRUD operations. So in the previous video, we created a service class, learnt about the @service annotation, and also learned that all the business related logic goes under the service class. So let's take a look at our to-do list. So creating a list is completed, and the next step is to create a controller class. So in this video, we'll be creating a controller class. To do that, let me create a package called controller. And inside this controller package, I'll create a class called personal details controller. So as we saw in the previous video, whenever a user requests, the request usually comes to the controller first, and then controller passes it to service class where the business related logic takes place and interaction with repository takes place. So for this controller class, I'll be marking it with the annotation @RestController. So let's look at what is @RestController. RestController annotation is used in Spring Framework to indicate that a class serves as a RESTful controller. So if we mention this RESTful controller, then that particular class becomes a RESTful controller. So what does RESTful controller mean? It is a specialized version of @controller annotation with the additional feature of automatically including the @response body annotation on all handler methods. What I mean by this is, there is one more annotation called controller. So if I just say controller, and if I have to create any methods here, then for each individual method, I will have to annotate something called @response body for each individual methods that I create under this controller class. But if I just say, instead of controller, if I just say rest controller, and I'm annotating this at the class level, not at the method level, then what happens is there is no need for me to mention @response body for each and every method. Let's say if I create 5 methods under this controller class, then there is no need for me to mention @response body 5 times at the method level for all the methods. I just have to mention it once as @restController instead of controller. So this @RestController is the specialized version of this @controller, which provides an additional feature of automatically including this response body for each and every method present in that particular controller. Annotation that is required, which is @requestMapping. Inside this request mapping, we can provide a string, let's say details. So what is this request mapping annotation? Let's look at that. So @requestMapping annotation is used in Spring Framework, yes, and it is used to map the HTTP request to specific handler methods in a controller class. So let's say I have one more controller. Let me create one more controller, calling it as marks controller. So in this controller, let's for this, let me also in the model class create a new model. Let me just go to my personal details, copy everything, come to model, create new Java class, say marks, and paste in the marks. So I'm creating a new model class called marks, and this thing will not contain any of this. It will just contain private integer marks, and this is just the marks of the user. This is the marks of the user. And let me create a repository, an interface, let's say marks repo. And for this, I'll just extends with JPA repository, and the entity class that I want to mention is the marks. Was it just marks? Yes, it was just marks. And then the ID type is integer. And I would like to annotate this interface with at repository annotation. So this is our marks repo, and we have marks model. Let me create a marks service class as well. Just marks service, and inside this I'll just annotate it with at service annotation. So now we have two controller. One is the personal details controller, and then it is the marks controller. So for this marks controller, also I should have the annotations present here. That is the REST controller and the request mapping. I'll just say REST controller, which is the combination of controller as well as the response body on the methods, and then it's request mapping. And here I will say something like, instead of details, I'll say marks. So let's take this two controllers. This is the first controller. So if I want to get something from my personal details table, the endpoint will always start with details. But if I want to interact with the marks repository, that is the marks table, then the endpoint will always start with marks. So that is what this particular request mapping is doing in both the cases. So that's a request mapping in our controller class. So basically, it allows us to define the URL patterns. The URL pattern is the one which we mention inside this brackets within double quotes. So this is all about request mapping annotation. In the controller class, we follow something called as RESTful architecture. So let's look at what is RESTful architecture. REST stands for representational state transfer. So this is an architectural style that defines a set of principles using which we will be designing and developing our network applications. So RESTful architecture is like a stateless client-server communication. What I mean by stateless client-server communication is the server provides the resources and the client performs actions on those resources. The server will provide the resources like whatever we are storing or the other resources, and the client will perform certain actions on those resources. How can the client perform those actions on the resources? They perform those actions through HTTP methods. What are HTTP methods? HTTP methods are similar to our CRUD operations. So in order to create or add a new data, we use something called post HTTP method. Using this post method, we can create new data or add new data. And then we have something called put. So using this put, we can modify or update data in our database. Then we have something called get. So suppose there is data already existing in our database and we want to retrieve those details. Then we use this get HTTP method. Next we have delete HTTP method. As the name itself suggests, if we want to delete a particular data or the resource, then we use this delete method. Then we have something called patch. Patch method is similar to put method. The only difference is, let me explain that with the example. So let me come to our personal details entity class. So let us say if I wanted to change my first name from Sumant to something else, then using put method, what I have to send while sending the request, I'll have to include the ID and then the first name to whatever it is changing to, and then the last name as the same and the address as the same. So let's say I had my name as Sumant S and the address was India. And now if I wanted to change my name from Sumant to Hemant, then I would be sending my ID, let's say 1, and then from the first name as Hemant, and then the last name would be the same, that is yes, I would be sending those details also, and also the address India along with the all the other fields. Whereas in patch, it's not like that. We would be sending the ID and the first name as Hemant. Only those two fields are required. The last name, since the last name and address will be remaining same, then there is no need to duplicately send the data again. So that's the difference. That's the only or main difference between put HTTP method and patch HTTP method. Hope that was not confusing. So this is all about the controller class. If you have learned something new, please do subscribe to our channel and support us. If you have any questions, requests or suggestions, please do let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like the video. See you in the next video.